Into chapter 2, we need to recall where chapter 1 has left us. The events in chapter 1 take place during the reign of King Ahasuerus, who is presented as this king with vast authority. I mean, he's ruling over a massive empire that stretches from India to Ethiopia. And the chapter opens with his prolonged display of wealth, his power, his greatness, but also his ego. There's a massive ego on this man. Now remember, King Ahasuerus is a Gentile. He is a pagan man. So there's a lot of authority, power given to this man, and of course it goes to his head. And we see as the chapter unfolds, this display of power gives way to something else. In the setting of this feast that he has given to his kingdom, after days of indulgence and a lot of wine drinking with that indulgence, what does the king do? He makes a command of his wife, the Queen Vashti. He wants the queen to come before all the men of his party. She is a beautiful woman. And again, what is he wanting to do? Show his control, show his authority by parading his wife in front of all of these men. But King Vashti has nothing to do with it. She refuses. And the situation escalates quickly because she has refused the king. So what does this do to the king? It angers him. Why? Because now people are going to question his power, his authority. I mean, if he can't control his own wife, how in the world is he going to be able to control this kingdom? Now, all this is going on in his head. But even his counselors are saying this may not be a good look. So they're feeding into him instead of pulling him aside and saying, you're making too big a deal of this. Even the counselors are feeding in to his ego. But what begins as a command that is not obeyed becomes a matter addressed by the counselors, but it takes another step. Again, it's going to threaten your authority over your kingdom. So you're going to have to take this even a step further than it just being your wife. So what does the king do? He listens to his counselors, and the counselor's like, it's probably going to be best if you remove her. So he's like, that's it. I'm done with her. I'm going to divorce my queen. But not only that, I'm going to set out a decree over my massive kingdom, stating that every woman must obey her husband. You want to see my authority? I'm going to show you my authority. This is a power trip on the extreme level. So by the end of chapter 1, the queen has been removed. The authority of the queen has been publicly asserted over the entire kingdom. And yet the situation has not been resolved. And this is where chapter 2 begins. So some time has passed. The king's anger has settled. And now the consequences of those earlier events begin to unfold. If we will, let's dive into chapter 2, verse 1. After these things. So you may be asking, how do you know time has passed? Well, that's how verse 2 starts out. After these things, meaning some time has passed. So after these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti, which is odd. I mean, this is your wife. You remember her after your anger has subsided, after you made this decree throughout the entire empire because she said no. And it's important that we understand that the king's anger has settled, right? Because now he's not just going to be making decisions based upon his emotions. We're going to see the even truer character of this pagan king. He remembers Vashti. Both what she had done by disobeying him, but also the decree that he's placed upon the entire kingdom. Now time has passed, so you would think, right, maybe, just maybe, the king would start to question himself. Maybe this powerful man would look back and be like, man, you know what? There was a lot of partying going on. I was probably in this state of not being very clear in my thinking because of the amount of wine that had been consumed. And she disobeyed me, so I flew off the handle. I listened to my counselors. I got rid of my wife because she didn't want me parading her in front of all these men who were also intoxicated. You would almost think maybe there's a sense of remorse here, right? But there's not. There's too much pride in this man for anything to be reversed, for him to even consider his wife and bringing her back again, for him to even consider approaching his kingdom and saying, that decree that I sent out, it's ridiculous. I need to pull it back. But that's not what happened. As a matter of fact, this verse right here is going to set the stage for what follows. Look at verse 2. Time has passed. He's going through with everything. Wife divorced, decrees going throughout the kingdom. Then the king's young men who attended him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king. So this response comes from those men who are around the king, his attendants, those who serve in his court. Again, there's no discussion of reversing what has been done. No reconsideration for Vashti. But instead, you have this, let's just call it what it is, this perverted idea brought before the king. Let's go get more women for you to fill her spot. And this isn't just saying, hey, let's just go in this region where you rule, right? Let's go within like a 5-mile radius. Oh, no. We're going to go throughout the entire empire and snatch up certain young, beautiful virgins. So, wait, what? And this really does fit what we have already seen with the king. This fits his ego-driven personality. This is how his kingdom operates. Look at verse 3. They continue, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces, not just a few, not just a certain amount, but all the provinces of his kingdom, to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel, under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given them. So we're seeing how this proposal is expanding. What was suggested in verse 2 is now more clearly defined, this search that is going to take place. Again, it's not just limited to the palace. It's reaching across the entire empire. You're even appointing officers to go out and look for girls of a certain appearance, young virgin girls of a certain appearance, to grab a hold of and bring back. This isn't like a talent search. They don't have an option to go and stand and perform or whatever the case may be and be selected. No. If you fit the requirements that the king is looking for, he's taking you. Let that sit for a moment. Right? So this takes place across the entire empire. The women are then brought back after being taken, brought into the harem, and placed under the custody of the eunuch Hegai. So he's going to be the one responsible for overseeing them. You understand why he chose a eunuch to oversee these women, the king's harem. Won't go into detail there. But here the language is direct. They are gathered up. There's no volunteering. You do as you are told. So what we're seeing is this exercise, this twisted exercise of authority that brings individuals into a system already established and operating under the king's control. Now look at verse 4. And let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This pleased the king. Here he is listening to all this, coming from the young men in his court, in his council, recommending this, and the king's like, that's great. That's what we're going to do. So this proposal is now moving to its conclusion. Now let's stop for a moment, okay? Because this sounds wicked and evil, does it not? I think we can all agree to that. But God is sovereign over everything that is taking place in this very moment. We cannot forget that. He is sovereign over everything that is taking place. And I want you to notice this as well. The way all of this is being set up to save the Jewish people. Now you go back to this time and you're thinking, and they're wrestling with this, right? Well, what is taking place here? This can't be right. They're struggling with it. Which should speak to us today. It doesn't matter what you may be going through, as difficult as it may be. We need to constantly be reminded that our loving, gracious, merciful, sovereign Lord is in control over all of it. Just in the prayer meeting, we got done speaking on anxiety. And I said, I'm the biggest hypocrite probably in the entire church to even be exegeting those verses. But we're seeing it here. What doesn't make sense to them is being controlled by the Lord. There's something else here that we need to pay close attention to. While these men are making these suggestions to the king, do you know what's missing? There is no discussion of character and who this woman should be. No discussion of wisdom or qualification beyond what is acceptable to the king. He's setting the requirements. And it appears that it is all about what she looks like. And the response is immediate. This pleased the king, and he did so. It doesn't appear as if there's any hesitation, no deliberation. He's not going to his council and speaking to them, asking, do you think this is a good idea? No, it doesn't matter to him. He's going to do what he wants to do because he sees himself as being God, the sovereign one. So what has been proposed now becomes a policy. Now look at verse 5. Now, there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. There's a lot of detail there, okay? This is important. Pay close attention because it's really at this point that we're seeing the narrative shift. Up till now, the focus has been on this ego-driven king and the structuring of his empire and the way in which he wants it to run. But now we're introduced to this different setting, this Jew living in Susa, whose name is Mordecai. And again, this matters because he is not described first by position or influence. That's not how he's described, but by his identity. He is a Jew. And his lineage is traced back to the tribe of Benjamin. And even the reference to Kish places him within a recognizable line in Israel's history. So while he is living within the Persian capital, he's not defined by the setting there. He is part of the covenant people of God. I mean, that's what the text is bringing into view by way of this verse. So again, the account is now moving from the center of imperial authority to a Jewish man living within it. Now, just in case this question might have popped into your brain, why didn't Mordecai return back to Israel when Cyrus gave the decree, when the Persian king came in, overthrew Babylon, and he gave the decree for the Jewish people to return home? Why didn't he go back the first time? Why did he stay? And I'm going to say that's a great question. I really don't have an answer for you. Really, Scripture doesn't tell us directly why Mordecai did not return to Jerusalem. And of course, the response should be, and we shouldn't go beyond what the text has given us either, right? We're not told, so what do we do with this? What we can is understand the situation that has been given to us in a broad context, if you will, a broader context. By the time of Esther, so let's go to the time in which all this has taken place. A return to Jerusalem had already begun under Cyrus, but it was a partial return. Not everyone went back. Many Jews remained scattered throughout the Persian Empire. Why? Again, this question goes back to, it could be for numerous reasons. They already had an established life there, so they just decided to stay. They had family that was staying there. They had friends that were there. And let's not forget, the travel was extremely difficult. You're talking about a 9-month travel to return back to Jerusalem. So even for some of them, they're thinking the travel is too dangerous for us to return back home. So it's probably best we just stay put right now. So Mordecai is part of the group of Jews who remained in the empire. Now look at verse 6. This gives us a little bit more information about Mordecai here, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. So this verse places us within the history of the exile, when Babylon came in, crushed the southern kingdom, and enslaved them and brought them to Babylon. So he is identified as one connected to those who were taken from Jerusalem when Nebuchadnezzar came in and crushed them. Now, I will say this. This doesn't necessarily mean that Mordecai was actually there, speaking of his lineage, because if Mordecai was there when Babylon came in and crushed them, Mordecai would be in his hundreds. So when it's talking about him and the understanding of the exile, it's speaking of his family lineage. You can trace his family back to Jerusalem when it was destroyed, and they were brought into Babylon. So we're seeing all this, and we're learning something from it. Mordecai is not in Susa by way of an accident. God has placed this man there for this specific time. And then I want you to go think about this. Think about all the events that had to take place, all the rebellion of the Jewish people, God warning them time and time again to stay within his commands, stay within his commands. He warned them he was going to crush them. And finally, it got to the point where God said, I've warned you enough. So they're crushed by way of Babylon, and it brings us all the way here to Mordecai in Susa for this specific moment. Y'all don't look anywhere near as amazed as I was when I was just thinking about that. I was like, man, you think about everything that has to take place. I get it. So here he is because of what has taken place generations earlier. Mordecai is part of the displaced people, living outside the land, under foreign rule, as a result of God's judgment on Judah. Now look at verse 7. Now he was bringing up Hadassah. That is Esther. Wait, why does she have two names? Okay, hold on to that thought. This is a great question. The daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and mother died, here Mordecai is, took her as his own daughter. That's amazing. So this verse is bringing Esther into focus. And it's a good thing. This book is named after her, so it's about time she arrives. Now, she is first introduced by her Hebrew name. That's what that first introduction is, by her Hebrew name. But then we're given what? The name Esther, which reflects the setting that she is living in. So we're seeing right here the understanding that she does not want to be recognized as a Jew. So she's going by her Persian name. We're also told that Mordecai is her uncle who is raising her because she's an orphan. She lost her mother and her father. So this is establishing the situation clearly, is it not? At least I hope so, or I'm not doing a very good job. So we have this Jewish girl who is in this city, outside of her land, has no power, no security, no authority. But we're also told she is beautiful in form and appearance. That detail is not an emphasis just given to us to reflect on for this verse. No, it's setting up everything that is about to unfold. So this verse is showing us two things here. It shows us how vulnerable she is. She's an orphan, and she is dependent upon Mordecai. And Mordecai is a man outside of his land. But it also introduces the very features that are going to place her on the very path in which God has decreed, her beauty. Look at verse 8. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Hegai, the eunuch, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. So the decree is carried out just as the king has determined. Man, I still can't get past the fact that this wicked king could just come up with this plan. He hears this plan and then he fulfills the plan by just saying, I'm going to set up officers in all the provinces, and I just want you to go and grab the most beautiful ones. It's not an option, so please remember that. The text is clear. She was taken. So she is now inside this process that has been set in motion under a system that she cannot control. And really, the king can't control it either, although he believes he does. Because I guarantee you, if the king were to look back on this, he'd be like, you keep that woman out of my palace, right? So here we go. Look at verse 9. And the young woman pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. So even though it does not say it, what has God done? He has placed Esther in this place of favor. For she finds favor in the sight of Hegai. I mean, that's what the text states simply. She pleased him and won his favor. Now, it doesn't explain how, but it does make it clear that she won his favor. And whatever took place, the response is immediate. I mean, she's provided attendants to provide for her. She's given food. She's given makeup. She is set at the top of the harem. And you think about how many young women were brought in, and she's brought to the top. Quickly this takes place. So we're seeing Esther, she's being positioned differently. And I hope I'm making this clear because God is not named. He's not going to be named in this entire book. He's not named, but he is at work ordering these events in a way that is moving toward a specific end. Now look at verse 10. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. Now we're giving another detail here in how this is proceeding forward. Again, Esther is not going to reveal that she is a Jew, and this comes from her uncle Mordecai. Keep your mouth shut about the faith, about the lineage. So this is not accidental and it's not overlooked. It is deliberate. She's staying silent on this matter. Again, at this point, the text does not explain why she's doing this. Even it remains quiet on this issue. So she's now within the king's household. Her identity as one of God's people is being hidden. Now look at verse 11. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. So here we're brought Mordecai back into view, right? Mordecai's concerned. Why is he concerned? Because Mordecai knows he has no power and no authority on what's taking place inside that palace. He can't even enter the palace, but what is he doing? He's wanting to remain close by, maybe to hear something, to find out how she is doing, because he does not know. And I think this is very important because you think about Mordecai. Here you have Esther's parents, his brother, sister-in-law killed. So he takes this daughter in. Actually, it's a niece, but he makes her his daughter. And he's raised her. And then, in the blink of an eye, this king makes this rash decision where she's just taken from him. How does that feel? Your daughter's here one day and then gone the next because of this decree brought about by the king. So he's worried sick about this. I think we can relate to that. I mean, it's within a walking distance from him, but he can't get to her. So he watches. And what we're seeing is that's leaving both of them in a position where the situation is outside of their control. So you have the king who thinks he's controlling everything. You have Esther who feels as if she has no control. Mordecai is in that same position as well. So just to kind of wrap this up, and we'll continue on next week, but Esther's been taken into the king's house. She finds favor. Her identity is concealed. Mordecai remains near, but he's unable to get to her. He's worrying. And from a human perspective, I mean, not ordinary events, but this life that they are living has now become ordinary events. And it's underneath this system that's unfolding within a system shaped by power and authority by this king. But none of this is random. None of this is arbitrary. All of this is playing out just as God has determined it would. And God's not even reacting to what's happening. Now, don't think that God's sitting up there and he's watching this play and he's sitting here thinking, oh, they went left when I thought they were going right. What am I going to do now? No. He has set all of this into motion. He is directing it. Even here, before anyone is clear on what is taking place, those being the people involved, they're having to watch this play out. But God has already placed every single person exactly where they need to be. How does he do that? Oh, he's sovereign. He's holy. And it's through these events that we were able to move forward in this book with the precision that cannot be explained apart from him. Okay, all right, we'll stop there. Pick up in verse